everybody, and welcome to the Penelope Possum channel with me, your hostess, Penelope the Possum. Tonight we're going to be reacting to Karens Who Died Because of Their Own Dumbness by Last Records by Patrick. So go check him out and go check out his channel.
Hi, I'm Patrick from Last Record.
Oh, I need higher volume, closed captions.
And today, we're looking at the most self-inflicted disasters ever caught on camera. From a Tennessee woman whose parking lot obsession ended in fire and tragedy, to an Arizona homeowner who climbed onto a scorching roof with a shotgun to wage a one-woman war against drones. It was July 15th, 2019, at a large, colorful hot spring in a major national park. Steam rose from near-boiling pools, surrounded by vivid orange and yellow bacterial mats, and wooden boardwalks threaded through the area, crowded with tourists. Signs warned visitors of fragile crusts that could collapse into scalding water, and rangers patrolled to monitor safety. Evelyn Carrington, 47, had built her life around ambition and control. A high-powered real estate agent specializing in luxury properties, she rarely took vacations without her phone and expected the world to bend to her will. She drove a sleek white SUV with a
If you're
vanity
wondering what
plate
I'm
reading
working on down
Soulbeat
here,
and
I'm
believed
working
rules
on a
applied only to
project.
others, while her tax contributions entitled her to special privileges. Her husband stayed at a nearby rental to golf, leaving Evelyn to supervise their two teenage children, who were embarrassed by her loud, confrontational behavior. Wearing pristine designer hiking boots and carrying a high-end camera she barely knew how to operate, Evelyn approached the hot spring, confident she could navigate both nature and protocol on her own terms. The park's boardwalks were designed to protect visitors and preserve the fragile thermal ecosystem beneath. The spring itself stretched more than 350 feet across, with water temperatures capable of causing third-degree burns in seconds. Multiple warning signs indicated the danger of stepping off the walkways, noting that the colorful bacterial mats covered fragile mineral crusts. Rangers carried specialized rescue equipment, trained to respond quickly to any thermal emergency. The confrontation began when a ranger noticed Evelyn's 14-year-old daughter stepping onto the bacterial mat to take a photo. Evelyn immediately challenged the ranger, insisting that her family deserved broader access and ignoring repeated requests to return to the boardwalk. She approached aggressively, gesturing with her camera, while nearby tourists filmed the escalating encounter. Spotting what she considered the perfect photo opportunity, Evelyn moved toward a section where the boardwalk curved away from the water's edge, leaving roughly 8 feet of bacterial mat between her and the boiling pool. She ignored the nearby rangers' repeated warnings and stepped over the safety rope, confident the surface beneath her boots was solid. The brilliant orange and yellow mats glistened in the morning sun, giving the illusion of stability, but beneath them lay a dangerously thin mineral crust. Each step she took made a faint cracking sound that went unnoticed amid the chatter of other tourists. After only a few steps, the crust suddenly gave way beneath her left foot. Evelyn plunged thigh-deep into the scalding water, the heat immediately searing her skin. Instinctively, she reached out with her hands to try and pull herself up, but the water burned her wrists and forearms almost instantly, sending her into shock. Pain and thermal shock overwhelmed her senses, and within seconds, she lost consciousness, her body floating face down. Emergency medical teams airlifted Evelyn to a regional medical center, where she was pronounced dead. The coroner determined drowning secondary to thermal shock as the cause of death, with massive burns contributing. Her core body temperature had spiked dangerously, and the thermal water had caused immediate loss of consciousness, preventing self-rescue. Survival was impossible under the circumstances. Evelyn's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the park, claiming insufficient safety measures. The case was dismissed after video evidence clearly showed her deliberate disregard for warnings and safety protocols. The incident prompted park authorities to enhance safety measures around thermal areas, adding extra signage and barriers to prevent similar tragedies. It was July 14, 2017 in Chicago, Illinois. The rooftop bar sat on the 9th floor of a converted warehouse in the West Loop with a wraparound terrace and waist-high glass barrier panel framed in black steel. Melissa Corin, 34, was a marketing consultant. She was particular about her image and quick to argue when she felt a rule was being applied to her unnecessarily. People who knew her described her as someone who needed to feel ahead of things, ahead of trends, ahead of other people. A former colleague once said Melissa had a way of deciding in advance that she was the exception to whatever was being asked of her. She arrived that evening with a friend. The two of them had talked about visiting the bar for almost a year, passing the idea back and forth until they finally picked a date. It had been on both of their lists for a long time, and Melissa wanted a photo that did the view justice. She ordered drinks at the outdoor bar and spent the first 20 minutes circling the terrace. She repeatedly rejected angles that didn't frame the skyline the way she wanted. Each attempt seemed to frustrate her more. She repositioned chairs, stepped into walkways, and asked her friend to retake the photo several times. Nearby guests began glancing over as her voice carried across the terrace. Small signs posted near the entrance and along the perimeter stated that guests were not permitted to lean over the railing or stand on furniture. Melissa eventually settled on the northwest corner, where the skyline framing was cleanest. She leaned her phone over the top of the barrier to get the height in the shot. A staff member approached and asked her not to lean over the barrier, explaining it was a safety policy. Melissa responded loudly enough for people at neighboring tables to hear, arguing that the glass reached her waist and that she wasn't doing anything unsafe. He asked her to step back. She shook her head and turned toward the skyline again. When he stepped away briefly, she climbed onto a cushioned bench near the corner. The added height dropped the barrier to mid-thigh, leaving open air above it. Her friend, standing a few feet away, told her to get down. A couple seated near the railing looked over as Melissa waved a hand dismissively and continued adjusting her stance. The staff member returned and instructed her to step off the bench immediately. Melissa replied that she was almost done and held up one finger without looking at him. He repeated the instruction. She turned slightly toward him, saying the bar was being overly cautious, and as she gestured backward with her right arm, her heel pressed deeper into the cushion behind her. The cushion shifted under her weight. Her left foot slid and her upper body tipped forward. By the time she reached for the top rail, she was already too far over the edge to recover. She went over the barrier and fell from the 9th floor terrace to the alley below. Emergency services arrived within minutes. She was transported to a nearby hospital with injuries that were not survivable. She was pronounced dead that evening. An autopsy later determined the cause of death to be multiple blunt force injuries sustained in the fall. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Her friend was treated on scene for shock. The staff member, who had twice asked Melissa to step down, gave a statement to responding officers. The bar closed the rooftop terrace for the remainder of the week. Following the incident, the ownership group removed the bench seating from the perimeter zone entirely and installed secondary cable barriers set 18 inches inward from the glass panel. Staff were given updated guidance on escalating safety interventions to management rather than continuing one-on-one conversations when a guest refused to comply. It was October 2nd, 2017. The residential construction site sat on the outskirts of a developing subdivision in central Arizona. The afternoon sun beat down on exposed dirt and gravel. Framing for a 2-story home stood partially complete with wooden studs rising against a cloudless sky.
We're just
Extension
watching
ladders
some
leaned against
Karens
the structure.
get what they
Orange
deserve
warning
here.
tape stretched across the driveway entrance. The ground was uneven, covered in loose gravel, scattered lumber, and electrical wire. Workers moved between tasks across the lot. Hallie Bates was 52 years old. She worked as a freelance property inspector, contracted by buyers to assess homes before purchase. Colleagues described her as thorough but impatient, often cutting corners to finish jobs quickly. That afternoon, she had arrived without notifying the construction crew. She was not authorized to be there. The property was weeks from completion. Hallie had been hired to inspect a neighboring home, but decided to examine this unfinished structure as well. She carried a clipboard and a digital camera. Hallie ducked under the warning tape and walked onto the site. A worker in a hard hat approached her, explaining that the site was restricted and asking if Hallie had clearance. Hallie barely looked up.
It's always a
dismissing the
good thing to
concern
see,
of the
right?
worker. She informed the worker that she was a light.
I've noticed a pattern here. That these ladies are usually high-ranking in some way.
Inspector and didn't require permission. The worker mentioned safety protocols. Hallie cut him off, stating that she knew construction sites better than most workers. She moved toward the rear, where a 24-foot aluminum extension ladder rested against the second-floor framing. The ladder sat on loose gravel with no stabilizing base or tie-off. Another worker called out, warning that the ladder hadn't been properly secured. Hallie ignored the shout entirely. Positioning herself at the base, she tested the ladder briefly, then began climbing. The ladder swayed as she ascended. She reached approximately 18 feet. The base shifted laterally. The gravel offered no traction. Hallie's weight caused the ladder to slide.
There we go.
She leaned backward instinctively, trying to regain balance. The ladder continued moving. Hallie fell. Her body rotated as she dropped 18 feet. Her upper back and neck struck the sharp edge of the poured concrete foundation. The impact fractured her cervical spine, severing critical neural pathways. The force caused her head to strike the ground. She landed on her back in the gravel. Her arms and legs did not move. Her eyes remained open but unfocused. Two workers saw the fall and ran toward her. One shouted for someone to call emergency services. The other knelt beside Hallie but did not move her. Blood pooled beneath her head. Her breathing became rapid and irregular, short gasps that grew weaker. Within 30 seconds, the agonal respiration ceased. One worker panicked and attempted compressions before pulling back, realizing the extent of the trauma. The compressions had no effect. Emergency responders arrived within 8 minutes. Paramedics found no pulse or respiratory effort. Her pupils were fixed and dilated. They pronounced her dead at the scene. The ladder remained where it had fallen. Investigators documented the site. They noted the absence of ladder stabilization and a loose gravel surface. Workers confirmed Hallie had entered without permission, dismissed safety warnings, and refused to follow protocols. The medical examiner listed the cause of death as high cervical fracture with spinal cord transection and secondary traumatic brain injury. The death was ruled accidental. No criminal charges were filed. The construction company paused work for 2 days while safety protocols were reviewed.
Wow, 2 whole days!
The Dubai desert stretched endlessly under a cloudless afternoon sky, the sand dunes glowing golden in temperatures reaching 95 degrees. Stephanie Bardot, a 34-year-old luxury lifestyle consultant, stood beside a dune buggy, a popular desert safari insisting she could handle them despite never having driven one. Stephanie had built a career advising clients on exclusive experiences and high-end travel. She worked at international luxury.
Oh no. Oh no. You do not disrespect the Doom Buggy, or the Doom Buggy will end you.
Coordinating everything from private yacht charters, VIP access. Colleagues described her as demanding, dismissive of standard, frequently citing her client to override staff recommend. That afternoon, Stephanie had booked a group desert safari tour that included guided dune buggy rides with mandatory safety briefing. Tour staff explicitly explained that all rides required either tandem seating with instructor or close supervision on marked flat routes. The compound had strict policies prohibiting solo ride for first-time off, especially in the challenging dune formation surrounding the facility. Multiple staff members informed staff requirements. Dune buggies are designed for desert driving, notoriously unstable, deep sand where soft terrain 30 to 8 rollover. Stephanie immediately demanded solo access to a dune buggy, citing her status as a luxury consultant and insisting she was capable of anything. When staff refused, she became increasingly aggressive, threatening
See?
negative reviews
Another-
and claiming connection to tour operator's corporate management. After 20 minutes of escalated confrontation, the exhausted staff super reluctantly authorized a solo on the condition she stay on marked. Stephanie refused the technician's offer of a 4-point harness and never tightened the lap belts, signed a liability waiver without reading it, and climbed into the vehicle. Within minutes, Stephanie veered
You always read the
off the
liability
designated flight
waivers
route
before you
and
sign them.
accelerated toward the steep competition dunes used for professional racing events. Staff members shouted warnings over radio communication, but she ignored them completely. Video footage from another tourist's phone, combined with the compound's CCTV and GPS telemetry logs, showed her buggy climbing a very steep dune at excessive speed, the wheels churning and the buggy losing traction as it crested. She was partially ejected as the buggy rolled, and the chassis came to rest across her torso because she had refused the harness. The staff spotted the flip and called emergency services immediately. They rushed to the scene but found the buggy had sunk into soft sand, making it impossible to lift without mechanical assistance. Stephanie remained struggling to breathe as full weight compressed her. Her face turned blue-gray as rescuers worked desperately to dig around the frame using shovels and secure inches from the pounds on recovery. A recovery truck arrived on site minutes later and, after rigging a winch, successfully lifted the buggy. Paramedics found Stephanie unresponsive with obvious chest deformities and no pulse. Despite immediate CPR and emergency transport to a regional trauma center, she was pronounced dead at 4:50. The autopsy showed that Stephanie had several broken ribs, collapsed lungs on both sides, bruised lung, a torn liver, and massive internal in her abdomen. The crushing injuries caused her to stop breathing and go into shock. Stephanie's parents were devastated, arriving from Paris to confront staff and grieve privately, later holding a small, low-profile memorial for their daughter. The Desert Safari Company faced immediate consequences as several clients canceled reservations after news of the accident spread, with management reporting a notable drop in bookings directly tied to concerns over safety enforcement.
It was November 17th, 2016, in Amarillo,
That
Texas.
seems
A cold front had pushed through the panhandle that afternoon,
unfair.
dropping
The
temperatures into the
company,
low 40s. By early evening,
like
the neighborhood
she's an adult. She knew what she was signing. She knew what she was doing according to herself.
supermarket glowed under
What,
fluorescent
are they
lighting
gonna
as
force her to
employees
do
prepared
stuff she
for
doesn't
tours.
want? Are they
Brenda
gonna
Harlow, 47,
make her
arrived shortly
buckle
after
her
sunset
seatbelt?
to pick up groceries for the week. She lived
If they did make her buckle her seatbelt and all the other safety shit that they were supposed to, they probably would have gotten a lawsuit claiming harassment or sexual assault.
in a gated subdivision and served on her homeowners association board. Former co-workers described her as organized and persistent, especially when challenging policies she believed were flexible. In retail settings, she often escalated minor inconveniences into formal complaints. That evening, she wore a thick winter coat, leggings, and open-toed sandals. While selecting frozen vegetable and packaged meals, she fixated on glare, reflecting off the glass doors, and loudly accused the store of misleading presentation because she could not clearly read labels. A clerk explained that extra stock was kept in a staff-only walk-in freezer. Brenda demanded access, insisting she had a right to inspect unopened cases herself and threatening to contact corporate. The shift supervisor refused, citing safety rules and liability. Brenda photographed his name tag and announced she would report the store for unsafe customer conditions. Moments later, as an employee pushed a pallet jack through the stockroom doors, Brenda slipped in behind him without authorization. Surveillance later confirmed she entered the restricted area alone. The walk-in freezer measured roughly 12 by 14 feet and operated at about
It sounds
-5
like a
degrees
fucking
Fahrenheit.
nightmare.
The insulated door was self-closing and equipped with a required interior safety release designed to open from the inside. Several large boxes had been stacked near the doorway, partially limiting clear access to the release plate. After the door seal
Okay, that's illegal.
shut,
That isn't
Brenda
illegal.
turned
You're not
and
supposed to
struck it
do
with a
that.
palm. She reached for the interior release, but had to maneuver around the stacked boxes to apply pressure. As she shifted her footing, frost near the threshold caused her sandal to slip. She fell backward and struck the back of her head against a metal storage rack. Surveillance footage showed her sitting upright for nearly a minute before standing unsteadily. She reached again for the release. Without gloves, her exposed hands struggled to maintain sustained pressure while repositioning around the boxes. Twice, she appeared to press the mechanism, but did not hold it long enough to disengage the latch. Investigators later confirmed the release functioned properly when unobstructed and fully depressed. Over the next hour, her movements became slower and less coordinated. Investigators later noted that prolonged exposure at that temperature would steadily impair coordination and judgment. Combined with the earlier head injury, her ability to operate the release mechanism
And the
likely
general
deteriorated.
lack of
She
common
alternated
sense.
between attempts to stand and periods seated against the shelving, remaining in contact with the cold concrete floor. Nearly 2 hours after entry, surveillance showed her lowering to the floor within a few feet of the door and remaining there. By the time an overnight stalker entered more than 2 hours after she went inside, Brenda was unresponsive. Emergency responders pronounced her dead at the scene. During autopsy, the medical examiner documented a 2-inch scalp laceration and findings consistent with a mild concussion. The injury was not fatal, but was determined to have contributed to temporary disorientation and slowed reaction time during the exposure. The official report listed accidental hypothermia as the cause of death, with head injury noted as a contributing factor. Core temperature in the
I
low
think she
80s
may have had a head
Fahrenheit
injury
was
before she
consistent
went in
with
there,
prolonged
though.
exposure. Store management later received a safety citation for partially obstructing the interior release and improper storage. No criminal charges were filed. It was July 4th,
That's surprising.
2016, in Riverbend, Wisconsin, USA. During the town's annual Independence Day parade, streets were lined with cheering crowds behind rope barriers as balloons drifted unpredictably in gusts up to 15 miles per hour. Gloria Winslow, 51, was known in Riverbend for attending city council and school board meetings, not for children in the system, but for enjoying a public voice. She had run unsuccessfully for local office twice and managed a small insurance office where staff saw her as meticulous, argumentative, and prone to escalate minor complaints. Gloria held strict opinions on
We're seeing
public
a
behavior, often treating shared
mighty
spaces as stages for moral
diverse
enforcement.
cast of
She had once
Karens
been
here.
asked to leave a family entertainment venue for confronting a birthday party and habitually stood with arms crossed and chin raised, a posture co-workers nicknamed the Gloria. Floats moved along Main
Are you a
Street
deer?
at roughly 3 to 5 miles per hour, some extending several feet
I
beyond their
see.
towing vehicle. Spectators were expected to remain behind rope barrier as volunteers kept the route clear.
If you are a deer and I am a bun,
Lightweight decorations
how does that work?
unpredictably toward the crowd. 4-year-old Nolan Prescott stood with his mother, holding a large red star-shaped helium balloon purchased from a vendor. Nolan bounced excitedly as the balloon floated above the rope barrier. Gloria,
I think that's
standing
the
nearby,
story of
had
Weasel's
already
birth,
complained about the
actually.
crowd standing too close and about teenagers blocking her view. When the balloon drifted near her face again, she snapped at Nolan's mother to control the child,
Yep.
then suddenly snatched the balloon string from Nolan's hand, causing him to cry. Still lecturing the mother about public behavior, Gloria stepped backward while holding the balloon, moving toward the rope barrier that had briefly gone slack when a volunteer shifted position. At that moment, float number 7, a large flatbed truck carrying a community display, passed directly beside them. The decorative platform extended about 3 feet beyond the vehicle on the crowd side. Still focused on the
Hate
argument and
people
holding
like
Nolan's
that.
balloon, Gloria stepped backward past the rope barrier and into the active parade lane without looking. The float struck her at hip height on her left side. Though moving slowly, the combined mass of truck and float totaled roughly 8,400 pounds. The impact knocked her to the ground, partially under the platform. The rear wheels missed her body, but part of the float's metal frame struck across her upper chest and neck as the driver moved forward several feet before stopping. The impact fractured her sternum, broke 4 ribs on the left side, 2 puncturing her left lung, and caused severe trauma to her larynx. Gloria remained conscious, but struggled to breathe as a nurse in the crowd rushed forward and assessed her condition, noting labored breathing and wet, gurgling sounds consistent with a collapsed lung and internal bleeding. Emergency responders arrived within minutes and airlifted Gloria to a regional hospital in Riverbend. She died in surgery from internal hemorrhage and respiratory failure. Multiple videos from cell phones and parade cameras documented her stepping past the barrier and taking the balloon. The county medical examiner determined the cause of death was blunt chest trauma, leading to internal bleeding and respiratory failure. Even at low speeds, the vehicle's mass made contact fatal, and investigators noted that Gloria had stepped past the safety barrier and into the active parade lane moments before impact. Nolan was unharmed, though he asked about his balloon for days afterward. His mother was cleared of any wrongdoing. Parade organizers added additional barrier lines and increased volunteer coverage for future events. Gloria's estate was handled by her 2 adult children, and co-workers held a small memorial, acknowledging privately that her tendency to argue in public made the outcome tragically unsurprising. It was July 22nd, 2017, in Atlanta, Georgia. The Saturday morning traffic on the interstate was moving steadily at approximately 60 miles per hour. A gas station sat just off the exit ramp, separated from the main lanes by a short stretch of service road that fed directly into the merge lane. Michelle Okafor, 44, was a property manager for a residential complex in DeKalb County. People who worked with her described her as someone who found standard procedures deeply frustrating. She had a particular difficulty accepting that rules applied to her the same way they applied to everyone else, and she had a habit of framing every pushback she received as a personal attack rather than a standard response. That pattern extended beyond work. When inconveniences disrupted her schedule, she often chose the quickest visible solution rather than the one being recommended to her. That morning, she was already running behind after an earlier delay and was irritated by anything that threatened to slow her down further. She took the next exit and pulled onto the shoulder of the off-ramp after her tire pressure warning light came on. Roadside assistance quoted her a 45-minute wait. She told the operator she didn't have that kind of time and ended the call before the explanation was finished. She stepped out, pressed the sidewall with her thumb, nudged it with her foot. It felt firm. The light had come on before. She dismissed it as another faulty sensor, locked the car, and walked toward the gas station instead. Inside, she moved quickly through the aisles, knocking a small display of bottled drinks with her elbow and leaving them scattered on the floor without stopping. She grabbed 2 items and walked directly to the front of the store, stepping around the 4 people already waiting in line. She placed her items on the counter, despite being told to wait. When another customer objected, she dismissed him and kept her position at the register. A loss prevention officer approached and instructed her to step
Sounds
back
like a shitty
and wait
attitude
her turn.
boosts her down.
She challenged his authority and remained at the counter. After he identified himself and repeated the instruction, she refused to move and continued insisting on immediate service. The officer warned that she would be asked to leave if she did not comply. She stayed in place, escalating the exchange as other customers watched. The cashier ultimately processed the transaction to end the confrontation. Michelle collected her items and exited the store, still visibly agitated. She exited the store, still visibly agitated, continuing her complaint as the doors closed behind her. She paused near the entrance, turned back briefly toward the glass, then stepped into the parking lot and pulled out her phone. She began typing her complaint as she walked, eyes fixed on the screen. Without slowing, she crossed the parking lot and continued editing the message as she approached the service road. The slight curve of the exit ramp and vehicles stopped along the shoulder limited her view of approaching traffic. Still focused on her phone, she stepped off the edge of the service road and into the active merge lane without looking up. The driver saw her too late and braked hard, but there was no meaningful stopping distance. The vehicle struck her before he could avoid it. She was knocked forward and came to rest near the right lane line. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Michelle was unresponsive with signs of severe trauma. She was transported to a hospital and died in the trauma unit 4 hours later. The medical examiner listed blunt force trauma as cause of death. The driver was not charged. The interstate closed for 2 hours for investigation. Investigators later obtained a statement from the store's loss
Just
prevention
2
officer to
hours?
establish Michelle's movements prior to the crash. It was March 18, 2015. The loading bay of an industrial warehouse in central Ohio hummed with its usual midday rhythm. Overhead, fluorescents cast harsh light across concrete floors marked with faded yellow pedestrian lanes. The air smelled of diesel exhaust and cardboard dust. Forklifts moved in
Teams.
practiced patterns, their reverse alarms chirping in steady intervals. Pallets stacked with metal components, each weighing close to 2,000 pounds, waited near the shipping dock. Leah Manning was 44 years old.
Oh,
She
boy.
worked as a logistics coordinator, a desk role that involved routing shipments and managing inventory reports. She had no certification
Oh,
to operate
boy.
store equipment. Colleagues described her as confrontational and entitled, someone who believed her office position gave her authority over floor operations. She routinely dismissed safety protocols, arguing that warehouse rules didn't apply to management staff. That afternoon, she was tracking down a discrepancy in a pallet count. The loading bay was busy. 3 forklifts were in motion, repositioning pallets for an outbound truck. Security cameras mounted on the ceiling recorded the standard flow of operations. Operators wore high visibility vests and followed protocol, checking mirrors and blind spots before maneuvering. Leah entered the bay from the office corridor. She moved aggressively across the floor, ignoring the painted pedestrian lanes entirely. A forklift operator was repositioning a pallet of steel brackets near a support column. The load, elevated on the forks, blocked the operator's rear view entirely. The machine began reversing. Its alarm sounded. Leah stepped directly into the path, positioning herself between the reversing forklift and the column. When the operator gestured for her to move, Leah waved dismissively and planted herself more firmly in position. She shouted that she worked there and knew what she was doing. The forklift moved backward approximately 1 to 2 feet. The operator felt the engine load abruptly and heard a dull impact resonate through the chassis. He stopped immediately. The rear counterweight, a solid block of cast iron weighing over 1,000 pounds, had pinned Leah against the steel column. The force compressed her pelvis, fracturing the pelvic ring and rupturing the pelvic vasculature. Leah let out a brief, involuntary gasp and remained upright as shock began to set in. Her expression shifted, confusion replacing defiance. For several seconds, she stayed on her feet, awareness fading in waves. Her knees buckled when operator immediately neutralized the forklift, set the brake, and dismounted, reaching for his radio. Leah collapsed onto the concrete. Blood pooled rapidly beneath her. She remained dimly conscious for several more seconds, her breathing shallow and erratic, before the catastrophic hemorrhage pulled her under completely. The operator radioed for help, his voice shaking slightly. Other workers rushed over, but did not move her. Emergency services were called
I
at
think that's the right call.
1:47 p.m. Paramedics arrived within 9 minutes. No pulse or signs of life were detected. She was pronounced dead at 2:03 p.m. Investigators reviewed
'Cause of her own
footage from multiple
stupid
security
ass.
cameras positioned throughout the bay. The combined angles showed Leah bypassing safety protocols, confronting the operator, and refusing to move when warned. The reverse alarm was clearly audible. The operator had followed standard procedures. No mechanical failure was found. The footage was not released to the public at the family's request and due to its graphic nature. The county medical examiner listed the cause of death as blunt force trauma with pelvic crush injury and internal bleeding. No criminal charges were filed. The warehouse resumed operations the following day.
It was June 22, 2015. The lobby of a mid-tier business hotel in Orlando, Florida, gleamed with polished Italian marble flooring. The afternoon heat had driven guests inside, where air conditioning battled the humidity that construction workers tracked in pool renovation. Cynthia Moraes, a 46-year-old regional for a national pharmaceutical distribution, had built her career on aggressive negotiation and an unwavering belief in her own importance. Her performance reviews consistently noted her results-driven approach, though human resources had fielded 17 complaints about her treatment of subordinate and service staff over 3 years. They described her as someone who viewed courtesy as weakness and compromise as failure. Her management style relied heavily on public confrontation and escalating situations until she received preferential treatment. That afternoon, Cynthia arrived expecting immediate processing despite holding a standard reservation. The front desk clerk explained that her room would be ready within minutes and asked her to wait briefly while they completed final preparation. The 3-minute delay triggered an explosive response. Hotel check-in procedures typically require 5 to 8 minutes during busy periods. A time frame Cynthia found unacceptable. She demanded an immediate upgrade, her voice escalating as other guests watched uncomfortably. The housekeeping supervisor had placed multiple wet floor signs along the marble pathway leading from the entrance to the front desk, clearly visible barriers that most guests navigated carefully. Cynthia ignored them entirely, focused on her confrontation with increasingly uncomfortable staff member. She grabbed an oversized luggage cart, maneuvering it aggressively through the lobby while continuing her tirade about unacceptable service standards. The cart's front wheel caught in a seam between marble tiles, causing a sudden backward pull. Her leather-soled stiletto heels found no traction on the water-soaked marble. She stepped directly into a wet section, her momentum carrying her forward as
That's why you always wear rubber bottom shoes.
both feet lost purchase simultaneously.
Make sure your shoes have plenty of traction if you're going to be a dumbass.
Her body twisting as she attempted to catch herself. Cynthia struck a protruding granite counter ledge roughly 42 inches high with the back of her head at full falling velocity. The impact was devastating. Witnesses heard a heavy thud against the counter, and a long scalp laceration along the occiput produced visible blood pooling on the marble. Unconsciousness came in. Her breathing was shallow and irregular, showing clear signs of severe neurological trauma. The front desk clerk activated emergency protocols within seconds.
Even if she survived this, she would not be the same person she was before.
Attempted jaw thrust maneuvers, applied direct pressure to the scalp wound, delivered supplemental oxygen, and held manual cervical stabilization. EMS arrived, though the severity of it largely. Paramedics arrived 12 minutes, finding Cynthia unresponsive, obvious skull fracture, and massive. She was transported to a regional trauma center, intubated en route, but never regained consciousness. The medical examiner determined death resulted from severe blunt force trauma, causing a basilar skull fracture, subdural hematoma, and catastrophic brain swelling. Hotel management reviewed security footage confirming Cynthia had bypassed 4 separate wet floor warnings before the accident. Staff members from other hotels reported her history of similar confrontational behavior to be a stay. Her funeral 3 days later drew a modest, primarily colleagues fulfilling professional obligations rather than personal connections formed through years of caustic.
It was May 25th, 2018, along Florida's Gulf Coast.
Most of the people that went to our funeral were just there out of professional obligation.
Bright afternoon sun, with temperatures in the mid-80s, creating ideal conditions for outdoor attractions and scheduled presentations. 50-year-old Clarette Don arrived with her extended family during Memorial Day weekend, dressed in a lightweight cover-up over swim-ready attire. A travel content creator, she frequently filmed immersive destination reviews for her online audience, often seeking closer access than typical visitors. Her family was accustomed to her tendency to test policy boundaries when she believed guest restrictions were negotiable rather than absolute. The aquarium's main attraction was a large dolphin habitat used for scheduled educational presentations. Prominent signage stated that guest interaction and platform access were restricted to trained personnel only. Barriers separated visitors from the water, and alarmed, self-latching gates secured the staff-only walkways above the pool, which extended more than 15 feet at its deepest point. Clarette had researched dolphin swim programs offered at similar facilities and anticipated she might be able to arrange closer access for her channel. When staff explained that interactive programs required advance booking and were not included with general admission, she argued that as a paying guest, she should be allowed limited platform access for filming. She maintained that supervised entry for content creation was a reasonable request and believed the restriction was flexible rather than absolute. Security responded as visitors paused to watch. While staff attempted to de-escalate, a Marine trainer exited through a staff-only gate to reposition
if you act like
equipment.
a piece of shit,
As the
people
gate
treat you like a
closed
piece of
behind
shit.
Clarette quickly followed before it fully latched, stepping onto the restricted platform above the water. Witnesses shouted warnings. Trainers radioed for emergency response while moving toward her. Ignoring repeated instructions to return, she moved farther along the narrow walkway, continuing her live stream. When
Just a moment. Oh,
There's still a little bit left.
I might have it.
security reached the secured gate, they had to wait for controlled access from inside. Without authorization, Clarette lowered herself from the platform's edge and dropped into the pool, feet first, without flotation support. Witness footage later showed her striking the back of her head against the concrete edge during entry before submerging. The impact and sudden immersion left her visibly disoriented. Although the water was not dangerously cold, she surfaced breathing hard and looking around as if unsure where the nearest exit ladder was located. Her movements appeared unsteady as her breathing became increasingly frantic against the smooth habitat walls. During repeated attempts to breathe, she aspirated water and submerged. When she resurfaced, her movements appeared slowed and poorly coordinated. Staff deployed flotation devices while a designated rescue diver entered from a controlled ladder. Within approximately 90 seconds, responders reached her as she slipped beneath the surface again. She was lifted from the pool as personnel initiated CPR on the deck. Paramedics transported her to a nearby hospital. Physicians later determined she sustained a head injury during entry and subsequently aspirated water while disoriented, resulting in prolonged oxygen deprivation and hypoxic brain injury. Despite advanced life support, she did not recover. The investigation concluded she had bypassed barriers, followed authorized personnel through a secured access point, ignored instructions, and entered a restricted habitat without authorization. A safety review confirmed that circulation systems, intake covers, alarms, and infrastructure met regulatory standards. The death was ruled accidental following unauthorized entry into a restricted area. After required inspections and coordination with authorities, the dolphin exhibit resumed operations. Portions of her live stream were reviewed as part of the official report, documenting the sequence of events preceding the incident. It was October 11th, 2018, at a suburban shopping center in Knoxville, Tennessee, where the afternoon...
That's not the way I thought she was gonna go, honestly. I was kind of expecting one of the dolphins to take her out.
Air smelled of autumn leaves and fast food, and the parking lot glistened after a light drizzle. Vehicles filled lined spaces as shoppers moved between stores and carts rattled over the asphalt. Greta Langley, 52, managed a mid-size residential property in Knoxville and had developed a near-philosophical view that parking spaces were a moral issue. She had called police on neighbors for minor parking infractions 14 times in 3 years, kept a notebook in her glove compartment tracking license plates, and been involved in 3 parking lot disputes, one resulting in a restraining order later dropped. Greta drove a 2014 SUV, often taking up 2 spaces, photographed other people's vehicles for documentation, and had high blood pressure managed by medication she sometimes forgot to take. She was 5 feet 6 inches tall, with brown hair, and a habit of standing rigidly while observing what she perceived as parking misconduct. A 29-year-old logistics coordinator named Dylan Ho parked his 2016 sport motorcycle, a Kawasaki Ninja 650, weighing 421 pounds, in a lined...
Okay, I will admit that when people park like assholes, it does make me want to get out of my car and hassle them sometimes.
Space nearby. The bike was angled slightly
Because
per
you
standard
have
motorcycle
A
practice, with a
four-door,
nearly full
maybe a
4.5
two-door
gallon
car.
fuel tank and an exhaust pipe
A
still
coupe or
hot from
sedan.
recent riding. Parking spaces were
You
clearly
do
limited,
not,
and the
in
bike did
any
not
realm
extend beyond
of
its
logic,
designated area.
need
Greta parked
4
her
parking
SUV
spaces.
adjacent to the motorcycle and immediately objected to its proximity. Her driver's side door could not open fully without brushing the mirror, partially because her own SUV was over the line. She photographed the bike from multiple angles and approached the customer service desk, demanding the owner be summoned. When staff explained no manager was available and offered to call security, Greta dismissed them and left the building. Returning to the lot, Greta stood near the bike for several minutes, visibly agitated and taking repeated photos. Passerby Hannah Lee asked if she was okay, and Greta insisted the motorcycle was illegally parked. Witnesses, including bystander Peter
You were
Carnes,
over the
noted
line,
the
lady.
bike was within the lines, but Greta ignored them. She planted her right foot and delivered a hard kick to the motorcycle's lower frame. The motorcycle tipped sideways, pinning Greta's left leg beneath the engine block and frame rail. The impact fractured both her tibia and fibula, trapping her under the motorcycle's full weight. Peter
Alright, so
attempted to
for
lift it,
right now,
but could
it's
not,
just her
while Hannah called 911.
legs.
Fuel began leaking from the motorcycle onto the asphalt,
Oh.
likely from the tank vent as the bike lay on its side. When the fuel reached the still hot exhaust pipe, it ignited, starting a small fire that spread along the fuel trail. Flames reached Greta's trapped leg, igniting her jeans and causing severe burns to her left leg, lower abdomen, and right hand. She remained pinned for approximately 40 seconds before Peter and 2 other bystanders lifted the motorcycle and freed her. EMS arrived 4 minutes later and transported Greta to the regional medical center.
How'd she
She
die?
underwent emergency surgery for fractures and burns and initially survived. 8 days later, on October 19th, she died from fat embolism syndrome, a complication where fat from broken bone marrow entered her bloodstream and blocked vessels to the lungs and brain. The local medical examiner determined the cause of death as fat embolism syndrome, secondary to both bone leg fractures, noting that her pre-existing hypertension contributed. Burns were listed as contributing but not primary cause. Dylan Ho was cleared of all wrongdoing after security footage confirmed the bike was legally parked. Damage to the motorcycle, totaling $3,800, was settled.
$3,000?
Sold the bike and purchased a truck. It was March 3rd, 2016, in Memphis, Tennessee. The early afternoon was clear and cold, with temperatures in the low 40s and a wind coming off the river. Downtown streets were busy with a steady mix of locals and visitors on weekends.
God, even cheap motorcycles are expensive.
Was a customer service supervisor at a call center outside Memphis. Her co-workers described her as difficult to redirect once she had made up her mind about something, and quick to interpret any challenge to her judgment as disrespect. She had driven downtown that afternoon with her teenage daughter for lunch and a walk along the riverfront. While returning to her car in a nearby surface parking lot, she realized her phone was no longer in her purse. She retraced her steps mentally and became certain she had left it at the restaurant 2 blocks away. She called it from her daughter's phone. It rang, and then someone answered briefly before hanging up. She concluded immediately that someone had stolen it and muttered that people had no respect anymore, adding that she wasn't about to let someone just take her property. She opened a tracking app on her daughter's phone and saw the location indicator moving steadily along a nearby road, consistent with slow vehicle traffic. Rather than calling the police, Olivia decided she would handle it herself. She told her daughter to stay near the car and not move. She moved quickly toward the road, eyes fixed on the moving location indicator. The tracking app showed the phone continuing north at a steady pace, consistent with slow-moving vehicle traffic. A rideshare vehicle that had been sitting at a light near the parking lot exit began pulling forward, accelerating gradually as it merged into the lane. Olivia had spotted someone in the back seat holding a phone and had already decided that it was hers. She stepped off the curb and moved alongside the passenger side as the vehicle began accelerating through slow traffic. Drivers behind the rideshare tapped their brakes, unsure why a woman was moving into the lane. Olivia shouted toward the rear window, insisting the phone was hers. As the car reached approximately 15 miles per hour, she grabbed the rear door handle with one hand and struck the side of the vehicle with the other, demanding the passenger open the door. She reached toward the partially lowered rear window and thrust her arm inside, attempting to grab the phone directly.
Oh, yeah.
The driver, startled by the sudden movement alongside the vehicle, braked hard. Olivia had no stable footing and had not secured her grip on the doorframe. The abrupt stop threw her backwards.
No, I
Her
don't
hand
always
slipped
use one.
free, and she fell onto the road surface.
It's mostly
striking
just
the back
whenever
of her
I feel
head
like it.
against the asphalt. The impact caused pedestrians on the sidewalk to turn immediately. The vehicle came to a stop.
I used
and the
Maisie
driver
for
and passenger
Hollow Knight
exited
because it
as
takes
traffic
place
behind them
underground.
halted. The passenger, a college student,
And
had
she is
found
a
the
mole.
phone on the sidewalk outside the restaurant and had been attempting to identify the owner when the call came through. He exited the vehicle holding the phone in plain view and later gave a statement to police. Bystanders on the sidewalk called 911. Olivia was on the ground and not moving. Paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. Olivia
Alright.
sustained a severe traumatic brain injury and never regained consciousness. She was transported to a hospital and died later that evening. An autopsy determined the cause of death to be blunt force traumatic brain injury resulting from the fall. The manner of death was ruled accidental. Her
dirty.
15-year-old daughter was released to a family member. The passenger returned the phone and cooperated with investigators. No charges were filed. It was May 14,
I mean,
2018. The Community Recreation Center in Central Florida
recreation,
sat
not
quietly in the
recreation,
midday heat.
dumbass.
Temperatures had reached 88
This must be
degrees
an
by noon.
AI
The outdoor
reading it.
pool area was cordoned off with orange barricades and multiple warning signs. The pool
You
had
love
been
the
closed
night? It would
since the
make a dope
previous evening
tattoo.
due to a filtration system malfunction.
Yeah.
Water had been
Yeah, it would
partially
be a
drained
pretty
for
cool
repairs,
tattoo if you were
leaving
still
the
getting
depth uneven
tattoos.
and unsafe. What was normally an 8-foot deep end now held approximately
You gotta
3 feet
fix the
of murky
ones that you
water.
have
The
right
shallow
now,
end
though.
was nearly empty, exposing stained concrete. Security cameras mounted on the building's exterior recorded the entrance area, but not the pool basin itself. Liza Perry was 61 years old. She worked part-time at a local retail store and visited the recreation center several times each week. Staff knew her as a regular swimmer.
Yeah,
who
the knight
preferred
is a
early
pretty cool
afternoon
design.
sessions.
He's nice and
Friends
simple and
described her as
clean.
stubborn and dismissive of rules she considered inconvenient. That day, she had arrived at her usual time, unaware of the closure. When she found the pool area blocked, she grew visibly frustrated. Other patrons had turned away. Liza did not. She approached the barricade near the main entrance. The signs clearly stated the pool was closed for maintenance. No staff members were visible. Liza placed her towel and bag on a nearby bench. She wore a one-piece swimsuit and swim cap. She gripped the barricade and climbed over, stepping onto the pool deck. The water level was not immediately obvious. Overhead, sun created glare across the surface, and the water had taken on a clouded, greenish tint from stagnant sediment. To someone familiar with the
Ew.
pool, the visual cues that should have signaled danger were obscured. The murky color masked the true depth. Her brain expected what had always been there. Liza walked to the edge of the deep end, where she typically entered. She did not pause to check the depth.
Out of your next
She raised
tax
her
returns,
arms
you're
above
getting
her
the one
head
on your
and
neck
dove
fixed
forward
and
in a
finished.
clean arc. Her
Probably
body
a
entered
good
the water
idea.
head first. The dive was executed with practiced form. Her hands broke the surface, followed by her head and torso. Within a fraction of a second, her head struck the concrete floor. The impact was direct and forceful. Her cervical vertebrae fractured at multiple levels. The spinal cord sustained a catastrophic high cervical injury. All voluntary movement below her neck ceased instantly. Her body went limp. She remained face down in the shallow water, unable to lift her head or move her arms. With her respiratory muscles paralyzed, shallow reflex gasps occurred briefly before breathing failed. Unable to cough or turn, water entered her airway. Within seconds, drowning was complete. The pool area remained empty. No one had witnessed the dive. Liza's body remained motionless, partially submerged. A staff member conducting a routine check noticed the displaced barricade approximately 20 minutes later. He walked onto the pool deck and saw the body in the water. He radioed for help and entered the pool. Another staff member assisted in pulling Liza onto the deck. Her skin was pale and cool. They began CPR immediately. No pulse was detected. Emergency responders
Oh
arrived
shoot, I
within
forgot
7
to get
minutes.
something out of my bag.
Paramedics
Huh?
continued resuscitation efforts.
In
but
the
found
front
no signs
pocket
of
of
life.
my
He was
bag,
pronounced
there
dead
should
at the
be
scene.
2 gloves. Could
Investigators
you get
reviewed
those for
security
me?
footage. The video showed
Yeah.
Liza climbing the barricade and
We're
walking to the
working
pool
with my
edge.
clay,
The
so I don't
camera
leave
angle was
fingerprints
fixed on the
all over it.
entrance and did not capture the pool basin, so the dive
Makes
was not
sense?
recorded. The county medical examiner determined the cause of death to be cervical spine fracture with secondary drowning. The death was ruled accidental. No charges were filed. The recreation center reopened the pool 5 days later.
It was August 14th, 2013. The afternoon heat settled thick over a residential neighborhood in Queens, New York, where a parking dispute outside a small
You
shopping
alright?
plaza would end in a way no one anticipated. Deborah Hines was a 44-year-old real estate agent working for a mid-sized property management in the borough. She had built a reputation over 12 years for closing deals aggressively and maintaining a demanding schedule that left little
Did you
room.
find them?
Her driving record reflected 3 citations for aggressive driving and multiple complaints filed by other motorists.
Yay.
At least 2 documented
Thank you.
road rage incidents where police issued warning. Friends described her as fiercely independent but increasingly confrontational in public. Particularly, she felt disrespected. Real estate work in Queens required constant mobility between properties, often involving tight parking situations and competitive use of limited street space. Deborah drove a heavy SUV, which friends say she treated as an extension of her professional image and personal territory. The vehicle's size likely gave her confidence in traffic confrontations, and she had been known to use it intimidatingly during disputes, inching aggressively toward other cars or blocking driveways. That afternoon, Deborah arrived at a strip mall to meet a potential client. Another
It's sad
driver,
'cause she
a
looks
local resident,
nice in
had
her
just pulled
picture.
into a spot Deborah believed she had been waiting for. Words were exchanged through car windows. The other driver refused to move, citing that they had reached the spot first. Witnesses reported Deborah becoming visibly agitated, gesturing angrily and revving her engine. Rather than finding another space in the half-empty lot, Deborah threw her SUV into reverse. Several bystanders standing near the plaza entrance stepped back slightly, but called out warnings as her vehicle accelerated backward faster than
Releasing
necessary.
air
Posted
from the
signs
bottom of my
clearly marked
glove.
the canal's proximity, and the faded yellow parking blocks were visible behind her. She seemed to have ignored both the warnings and the physical barriers, and was likely focused entirely on her foot pressed harder on the accelerator. The SUV jumped the low concrete barrier and snapped through the weakened guardrail. The rear
That's
wheels
a
hit the
reference I
pavement,
don't
and the vehicle's momentum
understand,
carried
isn't
it over
it?
the edge. The front end lifted briefly before the entire SUV tipped backward the canal with a heavy splash that sent water across the parking lot. The canal measured 8 to 10 feet deep at that section, its murky water filling the vehicle within 10 to 15
These gloves
seconds.
do remind me
Witnesses
when we
watched
have a
Deborah
chance,
struggle
we should
inside,
probably get
her
more of
hands striking the
those,
windows as
right?
the SUV sank rear first and
Gloves.
settled at a steep angle. The water pressure made door operation nearly impossible. She managed to partially lower the driver's window but could not squeeze through
Just
before the
that
cabin
they aren't the
flooded
right
completely.
side.
Fire department dive teams
Okay.
arrived within 9 minutes following a bystander's call. By then, the SUV sat fully submerged, only its front hood visible above the waterline. Divers extracted Deborah's body several minutes later. Resuscitation attempts at the scene proved unsuccessful. The medical examiner determined drowning as the primary. Water was present in lung tissue. Secondary injuries included fractured ribs and severe bruising across the chest and limbs, consistent with violent impact against the steering wheel and door frame during the vehicle's descent and struggle. Deborah's estate entered lengthy insurance dispute, with carriers citing reckless operation. Her death became a case study in regional traffic safety reports, documenting aggressive driving consequences. Witness statements provided consistent accounts of the incident.
It was April 15th, 2015, at a community recreation
I'm
center
getting
in
real
Boulder,
sick of this
Colorado.
AI
Late
voice
afternoon
reading.
light filtered through tall windows, stretching across polished hardwood floors lined with evenly spaced yoga mats. Ceiling fans hummed softly above the quiet murmur of participants settling into
Oh,
place for a
yoga
beginner inversion
class.
workshop. Along one wall, reinforced padding had been installed
Jesus.
specifically for supported headstand practice. 48-year-old Dexton Swale arrived early and positioned her mat
Dexton,
directly
that's
in
an
the center
awful
of the
name.
room,
Who names their
rather than
child
near the padded
Dexton?
wall area reserved for beginners. She owned a small retail business and was known among acquaintances for turning routine situations into confrontations. In previous classes, she had openly challenged instructors, correcting cues and dismissing safety reminders as overcautious. She often framed structured guidance as incompetence and had begun attending the workshop with the stated goal of proving that foundation drills were unnecessary for someone with her level of fitness. Over the prior weeks, she had ignored repeated recommendations to build shoulder strength and practice supported inversions first. During warm-ups that afternoon, she interrupted alignment corrections and questioned why experienced adults were being instructed in what she considered an overly simplified manner. Several participants shifted uncomfortably as the instructor calmly reiterated that unsupported headstands carried significant risk without proper conditioning and wall support. The instructor emphasized that falls from vertical alignment could drive axial force directly into the cervical spine. When the time came
Yeah,
to
you can
practice,
die if
most
you do a
students moved
headstand
to the
wrong.
padded wall section. Dexton remained in the center of the hardwood floor rather than
She's
moving
gonna
to the
break her
padded wall
fucking
area.
neck.
She declined foam blocks and brushed away the instructor's offer to spot her entry. Witnesses later stated that her tone had grown sharper as she insisted she did not need assistance. She planted her forearms and interlocked her fingers, placing the crown of her head on the floor. With a controlled kick upward, she lifted both legs into a freestanding headstand. For several seconds, she maintained vertical balance. Then her right elbow shifted slightly outward on the smooth surface, narrowing her base of support. Her hips drifted forward past center. Without wall contact to stop rotation, her body tipped beyond vertical. Witnesses reported that she attempted to correct by arching backward, but the adjustment accelerated the fall. Her full body weight drove downward as the top of her head struck the hardwood floor. Several participants later reported hearing a heavy impact followed by sudden silence. She collapsed immediately. Students described her eyes open and fixed for several seconds, but she did not move her arms or legs. Her breathing became shallow and irregular. The instructor stabilized her head and instructed others to call emergency services while preventing anyone from attempting to lift her. Responders arrived within 12 minutes and applied full spinal immobilization before transport. En route, she required assisted ventilation due to compromised respiratory effort. Hospital imaging later confirmed a severe fracture at the C1 to C2 level with spinal cord involvement near the brainstem. Despite surgical intervention and mechanical ventilation in intensive care, swelling at the injury site and confirmed spinal cord disruption resulted in loss of independent breathing. After 2 days on life support, Dexton Swale was pronounced deceased. Investigators
seriously,
documented
who the
that
fuck
repeated
names their
safety
kid
warnings about
Dexton?
unsupported inversions had been provided during the session. The medical examiner ruled the death an accidental recreational injury caused by complications of a high cervical spine fracture sustained during the fall. It was June 7th.
Yep. Well, that's it for tonight, guys. I hope you all enjoyed. I know I enjoyed. That was certainly interesting. Those Karens certainly did die the way they lived, which was complaining and trying to get things done the way they wanted to, not necessarily the way that was safest. Anyways, thank you all for joining me tonight here on the Penelope Possum channel. As always, do all the YouTube stuff if you feel like it. Make sure to stay hydrated, stay out of traffic, stay out of small spaces. places you can get trapped in. Stay awesome. And stay feral, my feral friends. I love you all. Have a wonderful night. And I'll see you next week, where we'll probably do more Hollow Knight or maybe play Warhammer. I don't know. We'll see how we feel that day. Till then, this is Penelope Possum signing off. Hang out with you guys next time. Peace out.